In this video, we will outline several ideas which were presented in the book.
In the first chapter, the author tells us facts and myths of globalization. There is an official history of globalization, and according to this history, the most important vehicle of development is free market and trade. However, there is an unofficial history of globalization. The author tells us this unofficial history with the implementation of the tariffs and use of protection by the developed countries. During the neoliberal globalization, there is poor growth record in developing countries, and the economic instability is increasing. The official history has distorted these facts.
The second chapter depicts the detailed economic development of Great Britain and America, describing the misleading views on the causes as well as forms of these developments. Chang has rightly illustrated the practice of protecting infant industries as an indispensable aspect for the development. Despite being the typical protectionist country throughout the 19th history and up to 1920s, the US was the fastest growing economy. It was only after the Second World War that the US liberalized its trade and started championing the free trade. Therefore, the most successful economists were protectionist. Actually, this fact profoundly questions the neoliberal orthodoxy.
The third chapter is called My 6-year-old son should get a job, and its main idea is based on the fact that the bad Samaritans are pushing the claim that the free trade is best for development. However, neoliberal policy on early stages leads to wiping out the industries by international competition. The main topic of the fourth chapter is foreign capital. The first type of foreign capital is grants. Grants are money given away by another country, but often with some strings attached. The second type is debts. They consist of bank loans and government and corporate bonds. The third type of foreign capital is investments. It's made up of two elements. The first is portfolio equity investment, where equity or share ownership seeks financial returns. The second element is foreign direct investment, or FDI, which seeks to influence the management of the firm on a regular basis. The foreign capital may seem profitable, but often it is very volatile. When economic prospects of a country seem good, a lot of foreign financial capital flows in. This raises asset prices beyond their real value, creating asset bubbles. When things get bad, often because of the bursting of these asset bubbles, foreign capital tends to leave all at the same time, making the economic situation even worse. Moreover, letting a strong company inside your country without protectionism puts at risk the development of domestic infant industries. Bad Samaritans think that if you liberalize foreign investment regulation, more investment will flow in and help economic growth. However, foreign investment follows economic growth, not causes it. Foreign firms won't come into a country unless its economy offers an attractive market. More countries will succeed if they more actively regulate foreign investment. The attempt by the bad Samaritans to make such regulation by developing countries impossible will not help their economic growth. In the fifth chapter, the author talks mainly about state-owned enterprises, or COEs. Bad Samaritans claim that you have to give people ownership over things, including enterprises, if you want them to use them most efficiently, because people do not fully take care of things which are not theirs. However, there are several arguments against state-owned enterprises. The main one is the principal-agent problem. The thing here is that when the agent says that he has done his best and that the poor performance is due to the factors beyond his control, the principal will find it very difficult to prove that he is lying. The second obstacle is called the free rider problem. When some people are monitoring the actions of agents to increase the profit, others are just free riding on their efforts. More and more people want to free ride, and the result is the poor performance of the company. The third problem can be applied both to communism and capitalism. It is called the soft budget constraint problem. If a state-owned enterprise is threatened with bankruptcy, it can receive an additional financial support from the government, which makes the limits of the budget soft. However, state-owned enterprises can be needed when natural monopoly exists, for example electricity, water, gas, railways, etc. In this case, technological conditions dictate that having only one supplier, government, is the most efficient way to serve the market. Also, state-owned enterprises are needed to maintain the equality of citizens. A service can be very profitable to a company, but simultaneously it can provide unequal opportunities to citizens. To avoid this inequity, the government may decide to run the activity itself, even if it means losing money in the process. There is no hard rule to make a successful state-owned enterprise. Everything should be considered individually, but with a pragmatic attitude.
The sixth chapter discusses important feature of the neoliberal ideology, intellectual rights, and their protection. The author demonstrates that the trade-related intellectual property rights agreement in the World Trade Organization strengthens the market power of the advanced Western countries. It makes it much more difficult for developing countries to acquire the new knowledge for economic development. The author disagrees with the idea that material incentives are the only things that motivate people to invest in producing new ideas. Scientific curiosity and the desire to benefit humanity are more important. Most industries do not need patents to generate new knowledge. Patents create monopolies, which impose costs on the rest of society. They create social loss. However, some forms of monopoly, including patents, can create more benefits than costs, such as raising productivity in the long run. The patent system can block knowledge flows into technologically backward countries that need new technologies to develop their economies. All of today's rich countries violated other people's patents, trademarks, and copyrights. Despite this, the bad Samaritan rich countries are now forcing developing countries to strengthen the protection of the intellectual property rights. The intellectual property rights system has made economic development more difficult. The strengthening of the rights means that acquiring knowledge has become more expensive for developing countries, as most of all patents, copyrights, and trademarks are held by rich countries. The author argues for a balancing between the need to encourage the people to produce new knowledge and the need to ensure that the costs of the resulting monopoly do not exceed the benefits of the new knowledge. We need to weaken the degree of intellectual property rights protection by shortening the period of protection, by raising the originality bar, by making compulsory licensing and parallel imports easier. The seventh chapter is investigating the inflation that is treated as the worst economic phenomenon within the neoliberal mindset. Impossible Mission Force is an intelligence agency feared by developing countries as it controls their access to international finance. Signing an agreement with the Impossible Mission Force is crucial when developing countries get into a balance of payment crisis. Neoliberals argue that inflation is bad for economic growth, and the lower a country's rate of inflation, the higher its economic growth. Low inflation is a necessary condition for investment. Neoliberals argue that there are two important things in achieving low inflation: monetary discipline and financial prudence. High inflation is harmful, but the harm from moderate inflation hasn't been proven. On the contrary, this process is compatible with rapid economic growth and job creation. According to neoliberals, any inflation is bad, as it seriously harms recipients of fixed incomes, salaries, and pensions. The author agrees that low inflation protects earned money better. However, the methods by which this is achieved can reduce the possibility of future earnings. Strict monetary and fiscal policies to reduce inflation can also lower economic activity, which will lower demand for labor, increase unemployment, and lower wages. Bad Samaritans talk about the importance of high real interest rates for monetary discipline, although they didn't have strict monetary policy when they needed to create new jobs and earn income. When the rich countries get into recession, they relax monetary policy and increase budget deficits. When it happens in developing countries, the Bad Samaritans, through the Impossible Mission Force, force them to raise interest rates to absurd levels and balance their budgets or generate budget surplus. These actions can cause unemployment and spark riots in the streets. The bad Samaritans have imposed macroeconomic policies on developing countries that complicate their ability to invest, grow, and create jobs in the long run. Developing countries should be allowed to pursue macroeconomic policies that are more pro-investment and pro-growth than the ones used by the rich countries, and that are more aggressive than those they are allowed to pursue today by the bad Samaritans.
The main topic of the 8th chapter is corruption. How is it that corruption leads to completely different consequences for the economy of different countries? Many corrupt states are in distress, others show decent results, and others even very good. To answer this question, you need to open the black box called corruption and look into it. First of all, what is a bribe? Bribe is a transfer of material values from one person to another. By definition, it doesn't necessarily have a negative effect on economic efficiency. When people are poor, their dignity is easy to buy. Those who are starving, they are unlucky to refuse to sell their vote for a bag of flour. The low income of the state makes it impossible to pay a decent salary to officials who become vulnerable to corruption. Bad Samaritans, based on neoliberal economics, argue that the best way to fight corruption is to introduce additional market forces in both the private and public sectors. But unfortunately, it is not useful at all. The relationship between the corruption and economic growth is very complex. We have countries that were corrupt but performed well economically. Furthermore, corruption often exists because there are too many market forces. Consequently, what the bad Samaritans have recommended have not solved the problem of corruption. The main topic of the 9th chapter is culture. Different cultures raise people with different values, which manifest themselves in different forms of behavior. Few would deny that people who exhibit behaviors such as investment, hard work, education, organization, and discipline will be economically successful. If economic success is really programmed by national habits, then some people are doomed to be more successful than others. It is very difficult to define cultures precisely. And even if this happens, it is impossible to determine whether or not this environment is favorable for economic development. The fact is that actions are not determined by culture. Moreover, culture can change. We should conclude with Chang that the culture is the result as well as cause of economic development. After all, the culture is not immutable. It can be deliberately changed through economic policy and institutional building.
In our opinion, these are all main thoughts and ideas which we mentioned in the book. Hope you will find them interesting. Thank you for watching.